So you're trying to build a personal brand, but you want to know what else you could be doing. And maybe you're afraid of stepping into some pitfalls that you're not wanting to fall into along the way. Well, today's your lucky day because in this special Halloween episode of the show, we are going to be discussing just that. We're going to be going over some basic principles of building a personal brand and what you can do to really solidify that and make good moves moving forward. So buckle up. I'm Steve Reed, and this is Brand or Die. So today I'm rocking the Slash look because he's one of the most iconic figures in the music industry, right? So he's not just a guitarist, he's literally a living legend. And a significant part of that legendary status comes from his exceptional personal branding. He's recognized worldwide, but not just for his incredible guitar skills. He has this unique image, which includes that iconic hat of his, sunglasses, the hair, right? Everything. And it's pretty cool when anybody reaches the state where their image is just kind of ubiquitous and it can be recognized by almost anybody. If this was Family Feud and the question was famous guitarists, no doubt Slash would be up there in the top of the list. People know who he is without even knowing what band he's in, right? They just kind of recognize the image. And it takes a lot of time to build that, but there's got to be something beyond just the image itself. Just having a good image is not enough. It has to be matched with something special. And usually that something special could be a variety of things. It takes a lot to kind of build this up. And sometimes people aren't successful with it. And there could be a lot of reasons why. So what we're going to try to do is map out a path that can give you the best way forward. Some basic core principles that if you follow these principles and really do them to the best of your ability, your odds of success are going to increase exponentially. So let's go ahead and dig into it. But first, I wanted to kind of define what personal branding is and how that's different from branding a business. So personal branding is basically the practice of creating and managing really a distinct and memorable personal identity, okay, for an individual. And it involves developing a unique and, as much as this word is so cliche, an authentic persona that represents, who you are, what you stand for, and what you can offer to others. Personal branding really encompasses a range of elements, including your skills, your expertise, your values, your personality, which is huge, and also your appearance. But let's go ahead and dig into it. And we're going to start with brand storytelling. So I've talked a lot about storytelling, and in this case, storytelling is very important. It's your origin story, where you came from, how you got there. And so you want to share that personal story and the experiences that you had in getting from A to B, how you got to where you are. And a compelling personal brand story can really help people connect with you on a personal level. There's some kind of story, there's some kind of narrative. You don't just throw something out there and say, hey, accept this. People accept things because there's something of interest there that they can grab onto. So give them those footholds that they could grab onto to begin understanding who you are and what you're about. And there's a whole 7-part basically formula to creating a brand story. I like to use Donald Miller's framing as building a story brand. I got a book right there. Boop. That's a great book. Check it out. I think to have some sense of a plan for a story in place. That way you can follow that story through. It helps with your connection with your audience big time, I believe. And it can be pretty powerful. And so the next thing I want to talk about is your unique value proposition. And this is going through the effort of really defining what makes you unique and how you provide that unique value to your audience. And basically that unique value proposition is what sets you apart from everyone else, especially if you're in a niche, right? If you're in a particular niche, there may be other people in there with you. I mean, you can be so unique that there's nobody else in your niche, but usually there's someone else in there. You're going to have some type of competition, some other people competing for that attention that you're trying to compete for. But in that case, you really need to define what your unique value proposition is. And that becomes really important, because if people don't know why you're different and why you're unique, and if you're just like everybody else, then they're not going to pay attention to you, because you're not bringing anything new to the table. You're not offering anything unique. Someone can just get what you're offering somewhere else and they'd be fine. And that's basically how commodities work. People shop based on price and availability and things like that. And it really doesn't matter. It's like, that's how we buy gas. You go to one gas station, you go to another. Does it really matter that much? They'll just go to whoever's offering you the cheapest price and go from there, right? So you got to have that unique value proposition. It's very key. And there are many ways to build this. It just kind of depends on what you're doing. But doing something in a unique way is a great way to get noticed, especially when it subverts people's expectations and it's not necessarily what they're looking for. And this can be done in good and bad ways, right? If you're a financial person and you decide you're going to dress like a clown, that subverts people's expectations, but that's not what people are looking for. That's not going to interest them. It's probably going to repel them. So you got to think about what you're doing. You got to know your audience really well. So part of subverting those expectations is really understanding what needs are not currently being met by the market, or what can you bring that's different, that's going to add some spice and really have people take a second look at what you're doing. Because if they see something different, then the assumption is that something different is happening. If there's a difference in your appearance, if there's a difference in how you speak and what you say, that's going to communicate that there's something different about how you solve their problem. And people may want their problem solved in a way it's not the standard way that everyone else is solving it. Basically, all it takes is looking at what everyone else is already doing out there, laying out all your competitors, seeing what people are doing, what they have done, what's working, what's not, and running some of your own tests, thinking of something creative. What's not being done out here? What would people like that nobody else is doing? And you could do that in a variety of ways. You could run some surveys. You could interview people. You can go onto social media and some forums and perhaps see what people are complaining about. Maybe everybody hates the current offerings, and learn why they hate them. What is it about them they don't like? And you could come straight out and attack those differences. I mean, a lot of the principles for branding a business and branding yourself as an individual are the same, but there are some key differences. And we're going to get into the specifics of some of those here soon. So your branding should communicate the value that you're bringing to other people. What can people gain from your expertise in your services? What do you bring to the table? And a lot of that value can be demonstrated through how you show your expertise and how you put it out there, how you solve people's problems in a unique way. And it's important for people to see what you do, that there's a reason they want to pay attention to you, because they're getting something from it as well. If someone is unique enough and creative enough, people can rally around that individual. People have a tendency to do that. It's just kind of human nature. We always like to idolize a particular individual because they can embody a lot of the things that we feel as well. And when someone embodies a lot of those things, they become a symbol in and of themselves. Many people have done this throughout history. You just think of any big, huge, famous, well-known person, the good guys, the bad guys. These people were all brilliant at creating personal brands. They had very clear values. People knew what they stood for. It was very obvious. And they put those things out there. And so that's what you have to do as well if you're building a personal brand, is to put those values on display. And the values in and of themselves become a big portion of what people will then value about you because of what you stand for. That kind of makes sense. So there's two ways of looking at value in and of itself. There's the value that you offer, and then there are the values that you stand for. So next principle is visibility. And this one is, I think, kind of obvious, but a strong personal brand is going to be one that's actually visible to people. They can see you, right? You're going to be in their sphere somehow. So you got to think about how you're going to approach that. And today it's easier than ever in a lot of ways, but it's also very challenging because there's so much noise. I mean, we've got social media, networking, public speaking, and all these other things. There's ways of getting yourself out there. You just have to look at who your niche is, where they hang out, and then go try to be where they are. And by doing that, people are obviously going to come across you. They're going to see you. But if you're not doing those things, and if you're aiming off in another direction where your target audience isn't hanging out, and you're just blasting stuff out into the ether, there's a chance that you might not get seen by your audience, by the people that you're existing to serve and help and build a community and a brand around, right? So the next thing we're going to talk about is authenticity. And I already kind of threw up in my mouth a little bit by using the word, just because it's become so cliche. You know, everyone's like, authenticity. But I mean, it's important to this because, you know, your personal branding should reflect your true self or the truth that you are standing behind and that you're putting out there. People can smell whether you're genuine or not and honest about your strengths and weaknesses and everything related to the persona that you're putting out there. And if they don't see it as being authentic, then it could backfire on you in a lot of ways. Again, it just depends, because if you have kind of a rebellious nature to yourself, you can kind of get away with a lot of stuff, right? I remember there were these guys in high school, and it was this one guy. He was a foreign exchange student. I can't remember where he's from. Maybe it was Brazil or something. But he got away with so much in class because he kind of portrayed himself as being this. He knew he was from another country. He like understood that he was exotic to the rest of the people in class. So he would do things that other students wouldn't do, and he would get away with it little by little. One day, he actually like picked up the teacher and was like shaking her, you know? And we're like, man, we get sent to the office, but the teacher just kind of laughed and everything. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this old Saturday Night Live skit where they're making fun of Roberto Benigni. And Roberto Benigni is just kind of coming in, and there's all these other people around. Roberto Benigni is he's kind of messing with them, and it gets gradually more and more extreme. The guy's like, Roberto, you know, and then he goes up and he like chops off this guy's hand with an axe, and he looks down and he just laughs. And everyone's just letting him get away with this crazy stuff just because he's Roberto Benigni, you know? So I thought of that when it came to this kid in my class. They're like, some people can just get away with stuff. But that's part of the kind of a persona that either they create or somewhere along the lines, it just happens to come into an existence. But I mean, you would look at that and go, well, that's that guy. That's just how he is. And because you believe that's how that person is, you accept as a reality the things that they do. And so that's kind of how I see that authenticity when it comes to building a personal brand is you really got to be true to who you are. And I think it's easier if it's real. Like if this is really who you are, you got a unique personality. There's just something that comes effortlessly for you, and you've built your brand around that. That's pretty easy. But other people, it's an act. And there are people that probably know or guess that it's an act, but they don't really care because they're enjoying the show, right? So the act is authentic. You can tell that they love what they're doing and this character they're portraying. You look at some of these professional wrestlers and things, like, it's fake, but they're just so over the top. Like Randy Savage. You go back and look at Randy Savage. That guy was so over the top in everything he did, but people just loved it. And he was authentic to the character that he was portraying all the time. And so there's a lot of really good examples, but hopefully that kind of gets your mind going and thinking a little bit about what I'm talking about here. So the next principle is closely related to that authenticity, and that is consistency. Your personal brand should be consistent across all aspects of how you're presenting yourself to the public, right? Your online presence, your in-person interactions, those things should all be completely consistent. It's far better if they are, because then that helps foster that authenticity that we talked about. But, if you're portraying yourself one way, if you're trying to come off as very meek and humble, and then people see a video of you like going nuts and shouting somebody down and everything, they're going to say that's the real image. And they don't like that image. They prefer the other one. Imagine if you saw Mr. Rogers just like sucker punching someone and cussing him out. You'd be like, oh, wow, that's the real Mr. Rogers? I don't like that Mr. Rogers. I prefer the other one. And so keeping that consistency is important. And one bad move can destroy the whole brand image. And I think there's many times we've seen that. I can probably give you numerous examples, but I don't think it's necessary. Just consider what's on the news 24/7, just people failing their audiences, people being exposed as frauds. It's not a good thing. So those two things, authenticity and consistency, are closely related. And it's, I think, more challenging when building a personal brand because you are the brand, right? Whereas if it was a business or a company, you could let a kind of a crazy CEO, you can give them a pass as long as the product is good. As long as they keep delivering on the promise, the brand keeps delivering on the promise, then people believe and trust the brand, even though they may not trust the person running the company. That leads us into the next principle, which is reputation management. All right. Reputation management is about how other people perceive you. And it's so key that your actions align with your brand for all the reasons we've already discussed. But with a personal brand, you have to understand that you're always on call. You have to maintain your image 24/7. And yeah, like you said, there's that risk that you could be called out as a fraud. And that could be very damaging. That could disrupt years and years of work and effort and really turn people off. But on the other side of that, you can acknowledge your mistakes. You can be vulnerable and you can show to people that you're able to learn from your mistakes. And that also can be part of the brand if there's a big screw up. People can tend to be forgiving over time as long as that value keeps coming and they see that change. And you may have to work that change into your brand story. People love an underdog story. They love a comeback story. And I think most people are willing to forgive if it's authentic, if there's like a turning point, right? And something's changed. And I know this isn't a fun part to talk about when it comes to building a personal brand, but maybe you've soured your brand already. Maybe you've done something. Well, that vulnerability and that authenticity, they're good things, right? I think we can all agree that. They can even go to strengthen your personal brand by showing your human side. Like, hey, I portrayed myself this way, but let's get real. I'm just a human being too. And start that comeback story, right? So those are all things that, hopefully you're never in a situation where you've had to go through that, but there are things you can do. You can repair your image. It's possible. I suppose it depends on what it is that you could have possibly done. But I think in most cases, there's ways to repair things and make things good with your customers. The next principle here is networking, right? This isn't just a solitary endeavor. And so as you do your networking, bring some strategy into play. Think about, okay, my audience, my niche, the people that I want to connect with. Who else do they like? Who do they follow? Who aligns with my personal brand that they respect, that I need to collaborate with, that I need to meet these people, maybe go on their podcast or appear with them in a picture on Instagram. Or there's a lot of different things you can do, but go out and meet those people, befriend those people, offer some value to them. And that's going to help you also build your personal brand through the associations that you make and that networking. So very important. And the last principle is also extremely key, and it's just balance, right? It's important to strive for that balance in your personal and your professional life. If you're building a personal brand and you always have to be on call and you're working 24/7 representing that image because you're out in public and you still have to be that person out in public, it could potentially lead to burnout or other personal issues that can negatively affect your brand as well. So there are tremendous risks in building a brand around yourself. And if you end up being kind of a total self-centered person and you don't care about your audience, then they're not going to care about you. So you got to be careful with some of these things. Sometimes people think they're God's gift to whatever they're doing, and they're not, and they try to be, and it just kind of blows up in their face. You have to realize that anytime you're starting a business, you're essentially looking to solve a problem for somebody. Somebody is out there in pain and they're looking for a solution. And every business is a solution to a problem. You know, if it's entertainment, the problem is boredom. If it's a service, there's something that people need done that they can't do for themselves. If it's a product, you're providing a solution that they can't do themselves. And in almost all these cases, they're things that people either can't do for themselves, they don't want to do it themselves, they're not competent to do it themselves. And so we all look for other people to help us with different types of things. And I think we connect more deeply when we can tell that someone is authentically trying to help us solve our problem. And it just so happens that the delivery mechanism is a personal brand. And sometimes a personal brand can be the way to get there. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes people don't care about the personal brand, which is why you need to do a little bit of research and look at the competitive landscape. Sometimes people are too hasty in trying to get from point A to point Z, and they will just cut all the corners and they'll skip so many letters of the alphabet. It's important to do your research, to feel things out, to do some little tests, and not fully commit to one strategy unless you've vetted it first, unless you've proven it and try to poke holes in it and see if it's got flaws. And so you should be the biggest critic of your own methodologies until they've proven themselves. What's the single riskiest assumption you're making with your business? And you say, okay, how can I validate that assumption? How can I prove that it's a risk worth taking? Sometimes people come to me and they have a little bit of a half-baked idea. We'll put a little test together. We'll go out and run that test, whether it's a survey or what have you. And they'll come back and say, yeah, there's not a need for this. I had an idea for a solution to a problem, but really I was the only one who would have bought that solution. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes people come up with ideas and they want to turn it into a whole business, but they didn't go through the effort of really finding out if there was a need there. And so basically, to sum it all up, personal branding is about taking control of how you present yourself to the world and making a deliberate effort to shape your professional identity in a way that aligns with goals and values that both you and your target audience are going to connect on, right? So hopefully this helps. Now, depending on your personal situation and where you may be in this whole process, you may need to talk to a professional to get some help and advice on what you can do to pivot or to improve or to change. You want to talk to an expert, somebody who's been there, done that, then just go ahead and give me a shout at vectyr.com. Or visit my website, vectyr.com, vectyr.com, and you can see a little bit more about what I do and how I could potentially help you in whatever situation you're in to get where you need to go. If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to hit that subscribe button, ding that bell, and If this video had some great stuff for you, go ahead, give it a like. I deeply appreciate it. I'll see you on the next exciting episode of Brand or Die.